Very warm good morning to all of you. So I'll be briefly covering on my topic, which is ICLs and IOLs in keratoconus. So we all know keratoconus is a bilateral chronic ectatic condition leading to very high regular irregular astigmatism, higher order aberrations, and poor quality of visual matrices. Now, there are three arms when it comes to visual rehabilitation in KC. One, the goal would be to halt ectasia through collagen cross-linking. And second, improving the corneal shape through intracorneal ring segments. And thirdly, the refractive error correction, which can be done through various methods. Today, I'll be concentrating on phakic intraocular lenses and pseudophakic IOLs, or they could be combined procedures. Now, further, with respect to management, it can also be classified depending on the size and centration of the cone, and also further subdivided based on the age and stability of keratoconus. Now, coming to the intraocular surgical options, they could either be standalone procedures or they could be combined procedures wherein these intraocular surgeries may be preceded or combined with collagen cross-linking and intracorneal ring segments. Now, the first subsection, the phakic lenses, here I'll be concentrating on the ICLs. The two main important features. One is toric ICLs in keratoconus. It's a corneal sparing procedure, hence it avoids any other further jeopardy to the already weak cornea in keratoconus. But then the biggest challenge is always stability of refraction. Even if, that is a challenge, we all know that ICL is a reversible procedure and lens explantation is always an option. Now, these are some of the prerequisites, ensuring that this procedure is always done in a stable keratoconic eye, which means refraction has to be stable and there should be no surgical intervention for at least 2 years. And in the case of post-collagen cross-linking, the refraction should be stable for at least 3 consecutive months. Also ensure that the cases that we choose should have at least a central clear cornea, keratometric values, ideally at least less than 52 diopters, and a central or a centralized cone. In the centralized cone, what I mean is, bring it back to its shape probably through intracorneal ring segments. Now, the category of patients who are going to be most benefited are contact lens users who are intolerant to contact lenses with associated VKC, also who may have a poor contact lens fit, but ensure that they have a best BSCVA of at least 2/50. And like I said, central clear cornea and keratometric values, ideally less than 52 diopters, and a stable refraction. These are the other routine indications which is applicable to all ICL implantations. And these are the list of exclusion criteria. But particularly when it comes to keratoconus, when not to do or implant an ICL, the first scenario is when there is extensive scarring involving the central cornea, and in case of a steep decentered cone. So is there any way of predicting what would be the visual outcomes if at all we are planning to do ICLs in irregular corneal astigmatisms, which would result in poor visual quality metrics? So first of all, we can check the best CDVA with glasses. Also look at the CDVA with RGPE lenses. Now, if there's a gross difference between the two, then we'll have to ideally wait until we can, regularize the cornea and then probably look at it as an option. Now, what is the difference in terms of the visual outcomes when you look at a centered cone and a decentered cone? So in a centered cone, there are 3 interfaces. The cornea, the ICL as such, and the crystalline lens. And therefore, in the post-operative outcomes, the patient may have minimal dysphotopsias, whereas in a decentered cone, there is an additional cone which comes into the 4th refractive zone, and this therefore will end up with a patient having large HOAs, ghost images, glare, halos, etc. Also make sure, this goes without saying, that you spend ample chair time with the patient counseling, and also make sure that the pre-op consent form is thorough and meticulous. Now, the Vision toric ICL is built on the same platform as the spherical model made up of Collamer. The cylinder is on the anterior surface, and the cylindrical correction range is between +1 to 6 diopters in 0.5 increments. So there are large number of peer-reviewed publications which are listed here, out of which one of these, the study done by Nawaz et al. Has a large follow-up of 38 months. And in terms of the larger number of patients, Alfonso et al. Have 25 eyes. Now, the pre-op planning can be classified as under sizing related measurements, assessment of aberrations. Importance should be given to pupillary size and make it a point to evaluate it in different lighting conditions, and all the other investigations mentioned here, which should never be overlooked and have to be studied in detail. Now, coming to the sizing of ICL specifically in keratoconus, it has been shown that there would be corneal and limbal stretching in advanced keratoconus cases, which would make it difficult to actually measure the white-to-white measurements correctly. This could lead to improper ICL sizing. And therefore, it would always be recommended to correlate the white-to-white values that are measured with the sulcus to sulcus values measured on UBM. Also, in keratoconic eyes, the ACD can be highly variable or deep. And when it comes to eventual choosing of the size, always choose to err on the higher side, which would then ensure a good rotational stability of the lens post-operatively. And particularly in eyes with a combination of myopia and keratoconus, meticulous examination should be given to rule out zonular weakness also. And like I said, the pupillary size position with respect to this cone can also have a bearing on the ICL optic and aquaport centration. Now, the toric lenses are designed in such a way that on implantation in the eye, they would be aligned as close to the horizontal axis with a minimum rotation of plus or minus 22 degrees on either side, could be clockwise or anti-clockwise. Now, this is a short video clip showing preoperative marking and intraoperative marking. Always ensure that the patient is in the sitting position to avoid cyclotorsion. Now, a short video clip showing toric ICL implantation in a patient who had undergone intracorneal ring segments. Certain points that one need to remember here is that there could be huge parallax issues here, especially with the intact rings in situ, making visualization difficult. Therefore, make sure that the side ports are positioned properly and appropriately so that the manipulation of the ICL inside the eye is not hampered. And towards the end, make sure that there is thorough removal of viscoelastic. Now, what are the advantages of TICLs in the case of keratoconus? They have good rotational stability. And also, even if it involves a procedure of repositioning or realignment, these can be performed without any intraoperative difficulty. And the V4C ICL doesn't really require a peripheral iridectomy, nor does it require intraoperative meiosis to maintain its position. And the online calculator is extremely user-friendly and has the provision to choose varying combinations of sphere and cylinder to achieve a target goal of emmetropia. But then there are limitations and concerns. It's off-label use, and surgical outcomes are just aimed at minimizing and reducing the refractive error, and they could never really be fully corrected. They can't be corrected fully. And higher order aberrations are always going to be an issue here because the aim of the surgery is just refractive error correction. So, and also there are always concerns that exist, especially regarding potentially induced higher order aberrations due to complex coupling of the IOL toricity with the corneal irregularity. The next section of the topic is IOLs used in keratoconus. The selection criteria, when it comes to selection criteria, indications would be all those patients with presbyopia and keratoconus and significant cataracts, and also those category of patients who are presbyopic but with clear lens but unsuitable for IOLs and non-progressive keratoconus. These are some of the commercially available toric IOLs. And also toric multifocals can be considered for those category of patients who desire near uncorrected vision, but in mild keratoconus and regular astigmatism. There are several customized toric IOLs available, example like the Ultima Smart Toric IOL, which can correct up to 12 diopters of cylinders. Preoperative assessment, I would stress on ample time to be spent on the tear film status, dry eye workup, and keratometric values measured on at least 2 different devices on different principles. And major concerns.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, ma'am, but the time is up.
Yeah,
if you
almost
could
through.
Move to the sum up slide, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, 30
almost
seconds
through.
more, please.
Yeah. So there is always going to be a post-op hyperopic biometry prediction error in severe keratoconus due to overestimation of corneal power and underestimation of IOL power. And also there are several issues such as the optical axis may not pass through the steepest part of the cornea, especially if the cornea is distorted, and default refractive index of 1.3375 may not be appropriate. Also, one should include posterior corneal astigmatism in the calculation. So axial length measurements also need to be measured, especially on the optical biometry, and newer modalities such as Pentacam can be used. Now I'll just sum up my presentation. So the take-home points: always confirm stability and stage of keratoconus before performing any surgical procedure. Choose the most minimally invasive and a one-step procedure if feasible. And Pentacam and manual K is better repeatable in moderate keratoconus. And standard K for severe keratoconus cases can be used. Thank you.